All right, I think we're ready to get going here. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us today for today's webinar. I'm Ryan Leeser, Vice President of Alliances and Partnerships here at Anecdotes. We have a great panel for you today, and I'll be introducing them here in just a moment. Before I do, I want to remind you that at the end of our conversation, we will leave some time for some Q&A. So please feel free to send us your questions in the chat, and we'll do our best to get to as many as we can. So to discuss the commoditization of SOC 2, we are joined by three amazing panelists. First, we are joined by Rivky Kerr Friedman, third-party assurance leader at Deloitte Israel. Thanks for joining us, Rivky. Next, we have Val Dobrushkin, Director of Risk and Compliance at Noname Security. Great to have you with us, Val. And last but not least, we have Taylor Hersom, CEO and founder at Eden Data. Thanks for joining us, Taylor.
Thanks for having me.
Before we dive into the topic today, I do want to give you guys a quick second to introduce yourselves so everybody can get a little bit better understanding who you are. Rivky, you want to start us off?
Sure. So hello, everyone. My name is Rivky Kerr Friedman, and I lead the third-party assurance services practice at Deloitte Israel. I am a CPA by training. I have 2 degrees, one in accounting and information system, and an MBA from Bar-Ilan University with specialty in information systems. Over the last 10 years, I've worked within the IT risk advisory department at Deloitte, serving companies from all sizes, starting from large enterprises and small startups in technology and financial spectrum mainly.
Perfect. Taylor, you want to go next?
Absolutely. Hey, everybody. Taylor, founder of Eden Data. Eden Data is a cybersecurity firm geared towards startups. We offer a subscription-based security department for startups and take over all things security, compliance, and or data privacy related. I have a background at Deloitte as well and was a CISO as well before starting this company. So thanks for having me and thank y'all for your time.
Absolutely. Val, want to round us off?
Sure. I'm Val Dobrushkin. I work for Noname Security. We're an API security leader. I'm managing and building out the compliance program there. I've done that before at a previous startup to get them to IPO. Before that, I was at Cisco for a while, building out and supporting various compliance programs. Before that, I did a lot of certification attestation work for the US Navy. So I've been in the security and compliance space for about 20 years.
Perfect. All righty, so let's set the stage for today's discussion. I think it's important we first all understand the purpose of SOC 2. Val, what in your opinion is the purpose of SOC 2 and any other external attestations?
Well, it really is to provide trust to customers that a particular company is secure, that we can trust that company with our data. I think SOC 2 is probably one of the best, if not the best standards for that. So instead of companies spending their time doing manual audits of every vendor, they can rely on a third party like Deloitte that we trust to do, really solid job digging into that vendor's security practices. And then me as a customer, I just review that report and trust that, the documentation evidence that listed in there was correct, and I can give that company all my sensitive data if required.
Perfect. Rivky, do you agree with Val? How do you see the purpose of SOC 2?
Yeah, definitely. Today, business world has become more complex than ever before, especially with the use of third-party service providers reaching record levels. As a result, third parties are woven into the operation of their customers, helping them to focus more on their core business operations, while on the other end, introducing risk from potential cyber breaches, data loss, or even service disruptions. SOC reports can provide a valued source of assurance for and about these service providers. In order to address concerns from customers regarding the services and solutions they may be obtaining through third-party service providers, companies and service organizations can request to have a professional services CPA firm, a service auditor, to provide them with an independent examination of their systems and internal control environment. By having an independent service auditor examination on organization system internal controls, a company receives the objective analysis and assurance that their customers, business partners, and management expect and oftentimes demand through contractual commitments. For example, organization may choose to employ a service auditor to assist them in developing SSAE 18 reports that can be done through SOC 1, SOC 2, or even SOC 3.
Great, Taylor. You see it the same way, or how do you see it?
I do. I think they covered all their bases. The way I look at SOC 2 is it's essentially the equivalent of us going and getting professional certifications. Me going to go get my CISA or my CISP. It's the organizational equivalent. So it's a good way to get that third party validation. Hey, look at me. I have a certification I can put on my proverbial fridge, and it allows you to get that clout to the world and that validation.
Great. So now that we understand the goal of having a SOC 2 report, it's time to understand what the commoditization of it looks like. Taylor, let's start with you this time. Can you give us your definition of commoditization of SOC 2 and how do you see that impact?
Yes. So the way that I look at commoditization of SOC 2 is that it's very much turned into, it went from being a standard that people use to gauge the security posture of an organization to very much just a selling point and nothing more, meaning that you've got software companies, you've got consulting firms, you've got auditors, they're all coming and they're trying to sell people on the SOC 2 certification solely for money and making this a low barrier to entry. So it goes from being an accredited source that we all used in the industry to gauge security to now being something that's kind of in some ways laughed at in certain regards, simply because folks are just trying to make money and push SOC 2 as quickly as possible and as easily as possible. That's the way I look at it.
Got it. Really interesting. Val, how about you? Do you define this, or what impacts do you see it having?
I agree with Taylor. I think me as a customer, I'm nervous when I read a SOC 2 report that does not seem to be of the standard I expect. And it erodes trust in the industry as a whole, in other companies that have gone through a really quality SOC 2 audit. If they're compared to reports from other companies that got this really just a selling pitch, it's really hard to tell, without digging into the details, and sometimes even then, it's difficult to tell which vendor you can really trust. So I think it affects all of us as an industry, with so many breaches and such, I would say, lack of trust in the security of, the whole world as it is. I think it is one of the things that we should be fighting against strongly, because, it's eroding that trust and that ultimate security that we have in our vendors.
Amazing. Rivky, is your definition similar, or what impacts do you see?
Yeah, so unfortunately nowadays companies and other players in the market are trying to reduce and make the value of the SOC 2 economically cheaper. Unfortunately, this leads to a chipping of the value of the SOC 2 report produced. This, as the quality of the work unavoidably suffers. Even the marketplace in this field used incorrect terms in their advertising, saying that they are SOC 2 certified, which is quite incorrect. SOC 2 is not a certification. The fees even are almost always so low that it is impossible to perform the necessary work as it requires to deliver an accurate technology SOC 2 attestation report.
Got it. Really interesting. Thanks. So Val, this might sound like a silly question, but is it still worth asking? Why is such a bad thing?
I think we should still ask for SOC 2. I think from my perspective, it's still the best attestation report that we have in the market. It's just that we need to spend more due diligence, really reading through the controls that have been outlined and checking to see how they apply to the services that this vendor is providing. And, if we have a good third-party risk management system in a company, then what kind of controls you'd really like to see there, and look at the vendor and look at the CPA firm that performed the audits. That is this somebody you can trust? Is this somebody that delivered before quality reporting, quality audits, and due diligence?
Nice. Rivky, why do you think the commoditization of SOC 2 is such a negative thing? Who do you think it affects?
Well, this situation can impact all user organizations and their auditors that want to rely on the report instead of doing all the work by themselves. They can use the SOC 2 report, but when the job is not done as needed, that can put a huge question mark on using those reports. This disvalues the status of the SOC 2 report in the marketplace.
Got it. Yeah, that's a great point. Taylor, what's your take on this?
And the question is the why, sorry, do you mind restating the question?
Yeah, just as far as, why do we think it's such a bad thing from how we're looking at SOC 2 commoditization?
I see. Okay. Yeah. I think a lot of it is related to reputation. It's the reputation of all companies involved. It's the reputation of the company that's going through the SOC 2 attestation. It's the representation of the audit firm, any software that they're using to get ready for SOC 2. And then it's also a representation, it's reputation of AICPA as a whole. I think that when you start to dilute the effectiveness of SOC 2 and you start cutting corners, one audit firm or one software company or one consulting firm can be starting to cut corners, and it damages the brand and reputation of the SOC 2 standard as a whole. And so that's why this is such a powerful negative, connotation, because it doesn't have to be that there's only a few bad eggs. The problem is that when there are a few bad eggs, it's spreading across the industry as a whole, and security professionals as a whole are looking down upon the SOC 2 standard, which should not happen, because I think that the original purpose of SOC 2 is still very much important to our industry and to just the security profession.
Got it. So I'd like to take a step back here for a moment and try to understand how we got here, because maybe it'll help us understand how we can maybe reverse it. So there are many actors that are impacted by the commoditization, as we mentioned, but there are also a few actors that have had a part in the process. Rivky, what role do auditors play in this process?
So the role of the auditors in this process is to deliver an accurate report that answers to all relevant standards, such as the all spectrum of reporting standards and subjects. By delivering the report and performing the work with the high quality and value that our clients, their users, and their auditors expect. For example, we at Deloitte have access to an extensive global network of professionals with specialty in risk management, cybersecurity, internal control, and in information systems. With commitment to quality and our core values of integrity, objectivity, independence, and technical excellence, for organizations who seek to provide assurance to their customers about the availability of their systems, Deloitte provides highly effective solutions and brand recognition that promote trust and confidence.
That's really interesting. Taylor, how do you see the role of auditor in this?
And do you mean the role in the commoditization, or do you mean in changing the story, I guess, for lack of a better term?
Take it from the view of both.
Okay. I can absolutely do that. So I think that from the commoditization side, the obvious negative connotation that we've been referring to, there are auditing firms out there that are essentially they're stuck between a rock and a hard place, because they are selling these SOC 2 services, and they have this challenge of, can I do an effective audit and issue a report with findings, and will this person still, or will this company rather, hire me again? They're obviously a business that's operating on revenue, and so they want companies that are coming back every year for a SOC 2 report. And so when they're issuing findings, a lot of customers get frustrated and say, oh, well, it was the auditor's fault, it wasn't my fault, and they go look for other auditors. And so it's actually a terrible thing for auditing firms, because it's such a challenge for them to offer a great service and to do their job effectively and to retain business. So I think that the direction that we need to go as an industry, both especially from the audit side, is that auditors need to spend more time educating their customers from the get-go and working with them and not treating them as a transaction. I think that there's a lot of transactional audit firms out there that don't even interact with their customers until right before the audit. And then they ask for evidence, and they look at a bunch of evidence, and they give a report, and they go, there's no relationship building, there's no education, there's no readiness, there's just not a lot of effort. And so I think that actually offers a lot of opportunity for the audit firms that recognize this.
Good insight. Good insight. Val, anything to add on the role of auditors in the commoditization process?
I just think, the reason we are in security, the reason we are in compliance is because we want to protect the world, and you cannot do that if you don't have integrity. And I think auditors are the front line of integrity and the security industry as a whole. That it is really up to them to hold that standard to the highest degree, and not be pressured by their customers to maybe not write as accurate report as they need to, but like Taylor said, rather work with those customers and educate them on the reasons why you need to have these good security practices in place. And ultimately it's a reflection on all of us, and it serves the customers poorly in the long term when those reports become useless, when they get external audits from their own customers or from SEC or whoever, and they find all these issues that they should have known about and remediated early on. And this is what we pay these firms for, to do this due diligence that maybe internally we might have missed, or at least another validation that yes, the controls we've done, the audits we've done, this is what this external auditor has validated for us.
That's fascinating. Let's move to the role of consultants in the commoditization. Taylor, what role do consultants play in the process, in your opinion?
So I think that consultants are contributing in a similar manner to what we were talking about with auditors, and that they are operating on a revenue model, trying to obviously grow their company. And so they're taking on customers and they're making a lot of promises. Hey, I can get you SOC 2 ready in a matter of weeks. I can help you. I can take all these things off your plate and everything's going to be so easy. And they sell them on this false pretense. And then you're coupling that with consulting firms that are partnering with audit firms that are also cutting corners. And essentially you've got two bad eggs that are serving a customer. It dilutes the effectiveness, of course, of the SOC 2, but it also dilutes the viewpoint of the customer and how they look at SOC 2. And so then you create almost for lack of a better term, a generational misconception for that person and everybody that works for that organization, everybody that works for that organization. So I would say that that's how consulting firms are contributing on the commoditization side. And I also want to touch on Rivky had mentioned earlier, like one of the biggest misconceptions about certification versus attestation, like even that basic premise that education, people are using that terminology all the time, certification and educating on that you're going to get a certification, and people just have this misconception of what happens when they finish a SOC 2 report and what that means for them and what they can do with it. And I think that that's largely contributed by consultants as well.
Got it. Yeah. Val, how do you see the role of consultants in the commoditization process?
I think there's a lot of room for efficiency and helping companies get there faster with their lessons learned and guiding the company to address the most significant security risks as part of that process. But I agree with Taylor. I think in a lot of cases there's this impetus to cut corners or to really deliver a particular result and skip over the details and what's underneath that I think needs to change. And hopefully we get consultants that have just as high of an integrity bar as the auditors do.
Rivky, what about you? Anything to add there?
Yeah, so from my experience, consultant can help in the process of achieving SOC 2 readiness and attestation for companies, as they have the experience and the view of a lot of other companies that are going on the same road. So they can make it much easier. We work a lot, started side by side with a lot of consultants. And once a consultant is experienced and know what he's doing, he can make the process much faster and easier. And the opposite is the same. When choosing an unqualified consultant, this can do much damage, as it can make the process much longer, make the company make unnecessary moves, like advising them to purge unnecessary solution, implementing controls that are unneeded, and sometimes forgetting to perform the controls that are truly needed according to the standards. So you have to be careful when choosing the consultant.
Got it. Yeah, that's a good transition into my next question. So the last actor I want to touch on is the role the audit automation tools play in the process. So Val, how do you see their role?
I see it as the future, and I can't wait for it to become the present. Because what is the point of a SOC 2, especially Type 2 report? It's an assessment over a period of time to tell us that this company has good security controls in place. And when we get that report, it's still months, sometimes full 12 months after the date of the beginning of this time period. So we're always playing catch up. We're seeing things that maybe they were in place at this time, but no longer in place. So I think the automation, for compliance vendors, it's really about delivering this near real-time view of what a company's security posture is. So ideally, me as a customer, I would go into some portal and I look at a vendor and I'd see, okay, these are all these controls, and this is their, the evidence or the control checks through these automation vendors that have been verified like a week ago or yesterday. So not like 12 months ago, not 2 months ago. So I think this is hopefully the way the industry is moving to. So there's still a place and time for these in-depth assessment reports by external auditors, but for the most part, I hope that we get to see this near real-time view of how secure is a particular vendor. So you give me access to this compliance dashboard report or metrics that I can see for myself, and they're patching on time. Do they have any outdated operating systems, or how is their incident response? When they tested their backup last, how did that go? Those kinds of things I can see for myself, and hopefully recently. So it gives me a lot more confidence than waiting for months for the report to come out.
Got it. So Rivky, I think you'll have a pretty unique viewpoint on this. What do you see the role?
As Val said, the direction trend is absolutely towards using audit automation tools. As for start, it saves a lot of time for the auditor and streamlines the process and make it more efficient. Take, for example, that instead of taking evidence of screenshot after screenshot, you can get all the info that you needed in one query, a list of changes, list of users, accounts, password, etc. And in addition, you can get it directly. All the communication between the auditor and the clients becomes much more effective as they officially speak the same language about the control materials. But at the same time, we mustn't forget that when using automation tools, the auditors need to ensure that all the material obtained answers to all the requirements of the SOC reporting standards. For example, information produced by the entity, we must, make sure that we got from all the information was getting from, and etc.
Got it. Really interesting. So Taylor, I know you've probably seen a lot of the automation tools out there in the industry. With your time at Eden Data, what do you see the role in commoditization?
I definitely agree with the other panelists in that this is the future. I think GRC platforms, from my experience, have always been very much arduous and expensive, and just makes you want to pull your hair out every time you're in them. And it's pretty cool to see where the industry has gone in the last few years and where it's trending towards. So automating a lot of the evidence collection, as Rivky mentioned, being able to rely more on a tool rather than a manual process. I love that. I do think that while we're talking about the commoditization of SOC 2, I think that there are certain vendors out there that are probably diluting the effectiveness again of SOC 2 because of their advertisements of we can get you SOC 2 ready in a matter of weeks, and that it can be so easy, and it's going to this tool will solve all your problems and do your taxes and a million other things that they're promising. I certainly think that hurts the industry, but I think that there are some great tools out there like Anecdotes that are going in the right direction in automating and filling in more of the people, processes, technology triangle.
Got it. So let's follow up on that, Taylor. Should companies just give up on SOC 2, or are there other forms of external attestations that can help in building trust instead?
I think we can save this. I think that SOC 2 is definitely still the de facto standard out there, especially in the US. I will say I saw a Q&A question come through regarding SOC 2 versus ISO 27001 that we'll get to, but I think that it's very easy that if you are in the US, looking at the security industry as a whole and how laggard it is, it's going to take us 50 years for people to catch up and actually understand half of what we're talking about and be able to pick a better standard. I think SOC 2 for the near future, 50 was a very big exaggeration, but I think that for the time being, SOC 2 is still going to be that de facto standard, and it's going to be a make or break point for many companies when they're in a sales process with organizations. And what we're seeing on our end is that it used to be just the big dogs that were asking for certifications. And I'm sorry, see, look, even I did it. Standard attestations and certifications. I think that now we are seeing even smaller companies are asking their vendors, do you have a SOC 2 attestation? So you're going to start seeing that trend more and more. More people are going to ask for it. And so I certainly don't think it's going away.
Val, what's your take here? Can companies afford to give up on SOC 2?
I hope not. I like it as the best standard we have, and for the most part, it gives us really nice reports and details that we need and how it applies to the service being provided. So, I hope it gets easier in the sense of compliance automation and more educated, more security-minded auditors, again, with great integrity. But I hope it's here to stay because, this is still the best way for me as a customer to evaluate a vendor in terms of their security practices.
Yeah, Rivky, where do you stand on this? Should companies give up on SOC 2 and look for other external attestations?
Yeah, so definitely not give up. SOC 2 is still an assurance report governed by the AICPA, the purpose of which is to give assurance to businesses in the marketplace as to trust criteria relevant to business and their partners. There are other attestations reports, but they do not play the same role. For example, AUP reports, they are also governed by the AICPA, but unlike the SOC reports, the independent auditor doesn't supply an opinion in the case of AUP reports agreed upon procedures. The auditor only examines the procedures that are in place and gives the results of the tests.
That's interesting. Continuing to for a minute, Rivky, what do you think commoditization is a phenomenon that we are seeing in other certifications or attestations?
So I think that the phenomenon is something that we're seeing and we will see more in the future and in other areas as relates to other attestation as clients are looking for assurance, confidence, and something to rely on. We see it currently as relates to EPA, high trust, cybersecurity frameworks, etc. I think that we might see it in the future as relates to opinions on software algorithm, etc., that they want us to check that it operates as expected. But yeah, that's in the future.
Got it. Val, do you expect this to happen with other attestations in the future?
I do. I think that it's happening the most to SOC 2, but I've seen examples of it in ISO 27001 and PCI DSS, for instance, that I was quite surprised to find.
Taylor, how about you? What are you thinking there?
I certainly think this is one of the downsides of capitalism, and there's going to be plenty of companies out there that are going to try to sell everything. You're seeing it in other industries. So PCI is a great one. You're also seeing it in CMMC. The U.S. government can't even friggin' figure out what CMMC means and what is required, and yet you've got people coming out of the woodwork saying we can get you CMMC certified and compliant in a matter of months, and it's just ridiculous to see because. It's just going to continue. Everything that we talked about on this call is going to spread to all the other standards as well.
FedRAMP, for example, as well.
Say that again, Rivky.
FedRAMP.
Oh, yes.
Well,
oh, FedRAMP's
yeah.
Another huge one. Yep. Darn consultants, darn auditors. No, I'm just kidding. But I certainly think that everything that we've talked about on how to stop it for SOC 2 applies to ISO 27001, FedRAMP, CMMC.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know we got a bunch of questions rolling on here from the audience. So keep sending them through the chat if you can. So last question before we go to those. From everything that we've heard today, it seems that the biggest problem with commoditization of SOC 2 is in fact that trust it was meant to build is eroded. Taylor, what should companies be doing in order to leverage compliance for building trust?
I'm sorry, it cut out on the second half. You said, what is our company doing to?
Yeah, just what should companies be doing in order to leverage compliance for building trust?
I'm sorry. Okay, perfect. So in terms of building trust, I think that it goes well beyond compliance. I think that's the first thing to state here is that compliance is a great foot in the door, but that companies need to start looking at security as a holistic approach, and that they need to use certification standards and attestations to be able to prove certain things to the world, because you're getting that third party attestation and that validation. But there's also things internally that need to happen. Investing in better security, going and going above and beyond when you can, in investing in tooling and investing in people and processes. I think that people need to realize that security and compliance and data privacy is not a cost center that everybody looks at it as. They think that they're just dumping money into or essentially lighting their money on fire. But you're seeing in the industry as a whole that people are asking for certifications, they're asking for attestations, they're asking for you as an organization to prove what you're doing to protect their data, because they are looking to trust you. And I think that it is a requirement of every business out there that's collecting sensitive data to prove that trust, or to instill that trust in their customers, and they have a duty to protect the data that they are collecting.
Got it. Rivky, what do you think they should be doing?
I think that companies needs to invest effort, money, people, thought, time in having an adequate compliance plan, including personal resources like compliance officers, manager, whatever, with the experience and understanding of their role to achieve business goals, and above all, to maintain trust. It's important to emphasize and understand that compliance is not just a checkbox to fill in and to be done with. It's actually a continuous and crucial process for achieving and maintaining trust in the marketplace. I think that the best proof of that is the dozens of thank you mails that we are getting from clients that their business efficiency and procedures are greatly improved and gained added value as the outcome of the process.
Yeah, that's interesting. Val, how about you there, Val?
Well, I think we have the carrot with the trust and transparency, and hopefully more business for the companies doing this right. But we also have the stick with external fines, where, you know, if you haven't implemented security controls, privacy controls properly, you might end up, you know, being sued for millions of dollars, or have a lawsuit or a fine on your hands. So, you know, it's in everyone's interest to do this right. And again, the external attestations, certifications, they're a way to prove that, yes, we've done this right. This has been validated by, you know, reputable third-party auditor to say that we're on the right track.
Perfect. Well, thanks for running through those. Let's move to some questions from the audience. Looks like our first question: how do we compare SOC 2 versus ISO 27001 certification and the level of assurance each does or does not provide? And I'll connect this with an additional question. We should go about comparing it to PCI. Val, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I mean, they're all great. They all serve a purpose. ISO 27001 is more of an international standard. So, you know, SOC 2 unfortunately doesn't extend beyond the US as much as I think it should. And I think with the SOC 2 and ISO 27001, there's a lot of flexibility for what kind of controls are implemented, you know, what's applicable to the business. You know, PCI, not as much, but also leaves some leeway. But PCI is more of a like an industry specific control, like HIPAA. You know, if you have a certain type of data, if you have a card full of data, this is where you go after PCI. At the same time, it has a lot of really good controls and audit checks. So it's a good thing to do anyway. And there's such a big overlap between most of these controls, then, you know, once you have a good foundation, whether it's ISO 27001 or SOC 2, you can continue to build on and add, you know, PCI, HIPAA, high trust. Just, you know, don't go for FedRAMP or CMMC because you'll go crazy. But most of the other ones, you can continue to add and you know, implement as needed. From my perspective, again, I feel like SOC 2 is the best one. I would go for that first. But again, if you're in the European marketplace, you'd be hard pressed not to do ISO 27001 as the baseline, you know, for doing business.
Got it. Rivky, you want to add anything there?
Yeah, sure. So as Val said, there are a lot of overlap between the ISO and the SOC 2 reports in the requirements, but the ISO is just a certification that you hang up on your door. The SOC 2 is actually report with Meet. The client gets a lot of info of the processes, of the internal environment control of the company, all the controls that in place, the way that we checked it, the results of the checking. So it has much more things to understand in the company and the environment than the ISO that you only get the certification and that's it.
Got it. Taylor, anything to add there?
I would just say there's a ton of overlap between SOC 2 and ISO 27001. They think between 70 to 80%, depending on who you ask. But ultimately, it comes down to your business and where you're doing business at. What we're seeing on our side is that most companies are going for both because of the ability to sell globally more than ever before. And I think that also it's worth noting that if you do go this route, work with an auditor that can combine these two audits so that you are gathering less evidence and you're not producing the same evidence twice for two different attestations, less certifications. You can absolutely do that. I know Deloitte and others do that and make your lives easier. It lowers the cost a little bit and then allows you to have the best of both worlds.
And just to add one last thing, you know, if you get a certificate from ISO 27001, it doesn't really mean anything unless you get a statement of applicability to go with it and potentially the audit report, you know, from that firm to review. You know, it could be a certificate for a lot of services that do not apply to you, for physical location does not apply to you, you know, as a customer. Whereas with the SOC 2, you know, attestation report, you get all the details. So it is up to you to review and see, does this actually apply to the services that are being provided to me? Does this, you know, assure this availability or security or, you know, privacy controls are in place that I need? So, you know, I think with ISO 27001, you can get, you know, a lot of the similar results. You just have to do a lot more digging as a customer from your vendors, not just rely on that pretty shiny certificate to trust them.
Such a great point.
Yeah, thanks for that, Val. So let's jump to the next one. Is there a source to provide assurance or insight regarding the credentials of an audit firm other than the AICPA peer review website? Or if I understand that correctly, how can they know who to trust? Rivky, any thoughts there?
So except of peer review, I think that reputation, asking other companies for their recommendation, this is the best thing for companies when they are choosing their auditors.
Taylor, anything to add there?
Unfortunately, there's not a lot of validation ability except for what Rivky said. So asking for references from that audit firm, we don't see 99.9% of companies do this. And it's one of the few ways to be able to get some validation from another company similar to your own that this auditor is not blowing smoke. So the AICPA website, of course, is a good way to do it as well. And then asking for a sample report, if they will give you some kind of sample report. Usually they templatize this and make it look pretty, but you can at least see the level of detail and you usually will have a good gauge of quality from that report as well. And I think it'd be a red flag if they do not provide you these things. So you can use that as an easy way to sign off audit firms if they're not willing to provide references or sample reports.
Val, any advice here, Val?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really about networking and getting feedback from people you trust. You know, if you know people that work in the security industry or privacy industry that you trust as, you know, having high integrity, that they wouldn't put their company through a so-called useless audit just for the checkbox, then, you know, ask them what firms they've used. And, you know, if you don't have those, review the SOC 2 reports that you get from your vendors, because, you know, you read through 10, 20, 100 of them, pretty soon you're going to be able to tell, okay, these firms look like they know what they're doing, not just, you know, in the style or layout, but the kinds of details they outline, the kinds of controls they include. And then maybe these are the firms that, you know, you want to use for your own SOC 2 audit.
Yeah.
I had one other quick thing. I would say rely on your partners too. If you have consultants in your corner, if you have GRC platforms, I know Anecdotes works with great companies like Deloitte, that you can usually get that validation. So sorry, I forgot to add that, but you can usually find folks that have already cut through a lot of the riffraff, for lack of a better term.
Perfect. Next question. How long should an average certification take? Taylor, what are your thoughts here?
Oh, okay. So we usually, this is a broad question, but it's a great question. I think that the first thing is it is not a few weeks. It is usually typically what we tell customers is anywhere between 3 and 6 months, depending on where they're at. And if they have a platform like Anecdotes, if they have a GRC platform in place, that will streamline it a little bit. But we usually say 3 to 6 months for type 2 prep. And I know that SOC 2 is broken into type 1 and type 2. So design and implementation versus operating effectiveness. With a type 2, we always encourage at least a 3-month audit period. Well, you have to do at least a 3-month audit period. We always encourage a 6-month audit period for your first year. And so you typically want to take that into consideration because you cannot start an audit until the tail end of your audit period.
What do you see in there for an average time frame?
Who was it to? Sorry, Taylor.
Sorry, Rivky.
Sorry. So the audit period goes for type 2 from maximum 1 year. Minimum is typically should be 6 months, but we can do it in 3 months. For type 1 is obviously just the day that we are checking that all the controls are in place for that specific day. The process, the readiness phase that we typically do before the audit phase is taking between months, something like this. Depends on the mature of the company, if it's been done some kind of security assessment before, if they have ISO 27001, etc.
Val, anything to add there?
Yeah, just, I mean, it depends on how good the security is of the company, right? If you have, senior people know what they're doing, they've been doing things right from the beginning, chances are there's not a lot of cleanup. It might just be collecting the evidence, being able to present it to the auditor. So it might just take, a month or two prep. But if you're doing things from scratch and you have to, review, redesign, build a lot of things, that might take 6 months, might take 12 months to get ready.
Perfect. Well, I know we got a few more questions, but it looks like we're coming up on our time window here. So first, I want to thank our incredible speakers, Rivky, Taylor, and Val. Thanks for joining us. Very, very insightful conversation. I'm sure you've given myself and the audience a lot to think about. So thank you guys for joining. I also want to thank everybody out in the crowd for joining us, and hope everybody has a great rest of the day.
Thank you all for taking the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.